So many things to do that we just lose sight of what's happening all around. And we're entering fall, which is a time of harvest, a time where we think about all the things that we've been preparing in our lives, the things that you've been doing, things that you've been getting ready for. We now look and say, am I on the path that I thought I was on? Are things that you've been preparing, are they coming to fruition? You know, it's interesting that during the fall, we live in a beautiful area. The leaves are changing and the colors. And I just think it's interesting that this time of year, we get so used to it, the colors, until you start seeing a lot of, tour buses that really come through your neighborhoods, come through this part of West Virginia, because they just want to experience what we sometimes take for granted. Sometimes that's the way it is in our spiritual lives as well. We have something special. We have something just amazing, a spirit and an energy, but people would love to feast on what we have before us, but sometimes we take it for granted, and we don't get a sense of what God really has, the banquet that is set before you. During a time of stewardship is a time where we kind of say, are we making that commitment? And I don't know about you and what your experience is with stewardship, but usually when we start talking about stewardship, people kind of take a little bit of a gasp, or that they reach for their back pocket because they're afraid that somebody's going to dip in and we're going to put a pressure on and some kind of a guilt trip to try and get you to commit, but that's just not my style. My style is to be able to look and say, I'm going to show you all of the opportunities. Lynette and I have talked for a long time about how fortunate we are to be among such beautiful and wonderful people that step out and do some of the most amazing things. And we talk about just how amazing it is and how we're growing just by being around you. And yet, there's a sense of which God has so much more that He wants to do through us. And so our goal here, when we talk about stewardship, is really to talk about, let me show you all of the amazing things that are set before you. All of the beauty that is surrounding you. All of the opportunities to transform your lives. And as we enter a time of stewardship, that's my goal. Is to kind of say, how would you not want to be a part of this? Now, at the bottom line, I'm going to give you an opportunity. But your decision is totally your decision. That's where I bow out. And I say, this is going to be between you and God. You don't answer to me. I'm just here to share what He has in store for us. You see, I don't know if you've ever been like this. How many of you have ever gone car shopping? If you ever go car shopping, most people that want to do that, they go on like a Sunday. Because usually there aren't many dealers that are there. And people can look and they can look at the cars without all of the high pressure. They can see what's going on. They can look for their model, but they don't get the high pressure, right, of somebody trying to get them to buy, to a high-pressure sale, making a deal and getting something out of you. And so what they do is they get to go around and they get to somehow what they call kick the tires. What stewardship is really all about is it's about making a differentiation, of asking you simply the difference between being a car buyer and somebody that's just kicking the tires. And I wanted to ask you this as we begin. When you think about your relationship to the church, to Christianity, to Christ Himself, are you still kicking the tires? Are you still saying, I don't know, maybe I can make a better deal? I don't know if I want to go in that much. Somebody once told me, they said they've got a BMW and a Mercedes. So the problem is that they're still on the dealer's lot. And I think sometimes when we talk about our own faith, we say, I am a Christian, I'm all in, and I'm dedicated to Christ. I just don't happen to show up very often, and I don't really want to do anything. I'm still a tire kicker at heart. Well, the thing is that Jesus... Good for you. I wonder if he needs change, if she needs change. That's a good time to come back. You know, all of us, when we come and we talk about what is the mission of the church, what is it that we're all about, it's kind of this idea of when we get here, the idea of church, sometimes our lives haven't really turned out the way we thought. You know, when we think about our lives, have any of you ever gone through a time of difficulty, a time of despair, where you look at your life and say, my life now is not the way it was when I was a child, or the way I imagined it. It's a lot different. And when we gather on a Sunday morning, do you ever ask that question? Or has God ever asked you that question as you sit here this morning? Why are you here? What are you doing here? What is it that you expected? Did you come to hear some good music, maybe hear some good prayers, maybe feel good about yourself? What is the reason that brought you to this place, to this moment? Why did you get up and come? What were you looking for? You see, I think all of us deep down inside, there's something that we're looking for. There's something that was taken from us. Maybe it was hope, maybe it was aspiration, maybe it was a sense that your life really mattered. Because sometimes we can fall into the trap of doing our day-to-day activities. We run so hard and we try and do well in our job and in our family and our career and our friends. Our expectations are overwhelming and we kind of get burned out. We kind of go, who am I? We get lost in the shuffle. And God whispers into your ear, who are you? Who do you think you are? Now, some of you come because you think you have church pretty well figured out. You think you understand what it's all about. If you just kind of go through the motions, that whenever you die, you get some kind of reward, and that's really all it is. You're kind of hedging your bet for the future. But I'm here to tell you this morning that maybe you don't understand what we're really doing here after all. Let me see if I can give you an example. How many of you recognize this scene? How many of you have ever been to a scene like this? Now the question is, if I were to ask you, and I said, many of you have done this, many have been to a football game like this, and if I were to ask you, I said, why do you do that? Why do people do that? You might say something like, well, they want to watch football. I'm a big fan of football, or more particular, I'm a big fan of WVU football. But that's not really why you do it. I mean, think about it. If you said, I want to watch football, you can probably watch it better, in more comfort, a lot cheaper, and a lot easier if you watch it on TV at home. But if you've ever been to something like this, or you've been to a game, a stadium, you recognize that there is a certain energy that happens when you're in a stadium like that. And what psychologists tell us is that we go to events like this because there's something deep within us that says, I want to belong to something. I want to belong with a big group that is cheering for something, for a team. I want to know that I'm part of something bigger than myself. And so we deck out ourselves in WVU colors, and you stand in line, you'll drive for miles, you pay a high price for tickets, and you'll buy dinner, and you'll drive, all because you want to belong to something important, something bigger than yourself. And so this morning I'm here to kind of share that I think what God is inviting us to do is to belong to something that is eternal, something bigger than yourself, something that will transform the way you see yourself, the way you interact with other people, your relationships with others, the way you interact with your job, how you see your family. All of that transforms when you understand what the church is really all about. See, I think in our world, day after day after day, you're being drained. Your job, your family, your expectations, they take things out of you. Energy, identity. And all of us need a sense of being renewed. We need a sense of being replenished. And I just want you to ask in the back of your mind, do you feel tired? Do you feel worn? Do you feel like I'm stretched too thin? Do you feel like deep inside you're wondering, what will the future hold for me? Are you worried about the election? Are you worried about the economy? Are you worried about the future of your own household, your kids, your family? Do you feel drained, empty, depleted? Do you feel like something has been removed? It's in the community that God invites us to be replenished, to be fed, to be nurtured. Now, there was a great prophet of old through the Old Testament that went through a time of being totally drained and depleted, and God ministered. And I think maybe by sharing some of that, we can learn maybe some of the mistakes, but also some of the promises that God has for us. It's the great prophet Elijah. If you remember, on the Mount of Transfiguration, Jesus met with two, Moses and Elijah. That great prophet, the great voice of God to his people, went through a time of despair, a time that he fell away into a cave and was so depressed. And yet God came to him. And I believe right now that if you're in that place, if you're feeling frightened or alone or drained, God is coming into your cave. He's coming to draw you out. And maybe this is your day of a new beginning too. Now let me set this up for you a little bit. Let me tell you a little bit about Elijah. In that time in Israel, they were worshiping false gods, which means that they were doing whatever pleased them. And God called a challenge through the voice of Elijah. And Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal to a contest to find out who finally is the one true God. And he said, what I'm going to do is set up two huge piles of wood. And whoever's God can burn up that wood is the only true God. And so the prophets of Baal began, and there were over 100 of them. And they began to beat themselves, imploring their God to see their prayers. They began to suffer for their God. And they began to wail and to cry out. And Elijah, the great prophet, begins to taunt them. He says, maybe your God is asleep. Maybe he didn't set up the alarm this morning. Maybe he's on vacation. Maybe he's just not awake at this hour. And finally nothing happened because there is no God of Baal. And the wood just sat there. And Elijah's turn came, and Elijah said, look, this is way too easy for my God. And he said, so I want you to pour water over the wood. I want it soaking wet. I want there to be no doubt when this catches fire what is actually happening. And so they poured water until the water was overflowing. Then Elijah prayed. And fire rained down from heaven and consumed not only the wood, but all of the priests of Baal. All of that other stuff had singed and burned up, and all that was left was Elijah. Now you would think that after this wonderful expression of God's faithfulness, God's justice, and God's mercy, that Elijah would be on the top of the world, but then there came the challenge. At the time, King Ahab was over Israel, and he had a wife by the name of Jezebel, and Jezebel did not take very well to having her power challenged. And I'd be willing to suspect the other things that are vying for your attention, your job and your career, your family, your to-do list, they will not take kindly to other gods and will demand your attention as well. And so Jezebel came up and said, I am going to see that you are killed, Elijah, for all that you have done against the power of these false gods. And you would think that Elijah would say, but I've got God on my side. What can you do to me? But Elijah was frightened and exhausted. And that's where we want to pick up our story. This morning I wanted to read to you that passage from 1 Kings chapter 19. This is Elijah. Elijah came to a cave and he camped there. And the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, why are you here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very zealous for the Lord of hosts. For the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. would stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great strong wind split the mountain and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake came, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire came, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak, and he went out and he stood at the entrance to the cave. And a voice came to him and said, "Why are you here, Elijah?" This is the word of God for the people of God. We come to that place even in our own individuals where you can say, "I've never had any problems. I've never been sad, never been depressed, never been confused or lost or alone. I've never grieved the loss of a loved one. I've never grieved the loss of a dream or an ambition." Maybe you're one of those rare human beings that goes through life with blinders on, saying, "I'm a rock. No one touches me and I touch no one." But for the rest of us, for all of you that have gathered here, that question lies squarely in your lap right now. So tell me, why are you here? Elijah had this great, amazing moment in his life where he and God were in harmony with one another. Elijah called down fire and demonstrated to the entire nation of Israel that there is only one true God. And yet in a moment, he was forced into a cave, hiding away from life, hoping that life wouldn't touch him and that he could live out his days as a hermit far away from his calling until God comes. Here's the good news about this story. If you find in your own life that you're hiding away, that you've been hiding away, maybe you've been in a cave for years, that your dreams have forced you to do something that you're not proud of, and you've been hiding it away from everybody else, in that moment, God still whispers in your ear, "Why have you come? Why are you here? What are you looking for? What do you hope to find?" See, the first thing I think that drew Elijah to that cave was that we're running so fast, but we're losing ground. Have you ever found that with cell phones and technology and texts and emails, people now are doing their work emails at home. They're doing more work. They're spending more hours on the job, trying to accomplish more, trying to fill that emptiness, those expectations that everybody has. We're doing more faster, and yet we're losing our identity. We're losing ground. Elijah was exhausted. Elijah was burnt out. He was so tired of everything that had happened. And when he was threatened, he could not stand up against the weight. You see, there's all kinds of pressures that are going to come at you. Many of us take care of our outer selves. We take care of our clothes and our appearance, and we feed, 3 times a day. But how often do you feed your soul? How often do you nurture your emotions? How healthy are you emotionally and spiritually? Are you like a wisp that the slightest upset will send you into a tailspin? Elijah was exhausted. Why are we here today? Because we need to be fed. We need to know that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. We need to know that wherever you are, whatever you're facing right now, God is right there with you. If you've been in a cave for years, He's drawing you out. He's saying there's so much more. Stewardship is not something we want from you. It's something that we want for you. It's the ability to participate in a story and in a mission that is greater than even you realize. Yesterday we had a wonderful opportunity to do some cleaning along the highway. And when we showed up, we had about 7 or 8 or 9 workers, and we had hoped for many more. But as we set out and we began to do it, everybody said, what a wonderful experience that was. To just be out there and to be doing something. There's so much more that is available if we're willing to risk. How are you being fed emotionally and spiritually with worship and prayer? It's what we want for you. Elijah was exhausted. We also realize that we're often driven more by fear than by faith. When you're exhausted, everything becomes larger than life. When it's just you against the world, you don't have a chance. When it's you and God against the world doesn't have a chance. That's the difference. Are you being driven by your fears of the future, of your retirement, of your job, of people's expectations? Or are you being driven because this is what God has called me to do? This is why I was born. My life is not a mistake. Elijah was hiding from life. He was hiding from all of the problems that we often encounter. He was hoping nobody would see him, nobody would notice. Are you being prepared as a disciple? One of the things that we have as Christians is we often have this expectation that if we're part of a church and we show up every Sunday and we go through the motions and we say the right things at the right time, life is going to go smooth. Part of it, what we're trying to do is say, I'm trying to buy some insurance that life goes well for me. This is what I want to do. And yet we know that Jesus told his own disciples, he told them, if they're going to persecute me, they're going to persecute you as well. That's what you're signing up for. You're signing up for hard work. And that's what you're buying into. The question is, are you bought into it yet, or are you still kicking a tire for a cheaper model? Something that doesn't demand as much as church demands. We're looking for an easier route. You're hiding away from the truth of what it means to be a disciple. And finally, Elijah was hiding because sometimes we want the spectacle, but not the struggle. Of the two main seasons of the church life, which are the two Sundays that generally are the highest attended in every church in the country? That's why we call them our CEOs, right? Our Christmas and Easter only. Why do people show up at Christmas and Easter? Because generally, that's when the spectacle is so great. That's when the sanctuary is decorated at Christmas with poinsettias or lilies. We have choirs and hymns. There's candlelight. It's beautiful, and people love that kind of stuff. They come for the spectacle. What Sundays generally are the lowest attended? Generally, during the season of July and August. During the dog days of summer. There's so much more stuff that we'd rather do. It's not as special as I would like. It's not as exciting. And so sometimes we want the spectacular. We look for the amazing when God is in the whisper. That's the paradox that we have to live in. We have to look for the little things because God is drawing us something better. Elijah was disillusioned. I thought church would be easier than this. What do you mean you have expectations? What do you mean you have things that I should be doing? I thought I just showed up. That's the difference between a pew sitter and a participant. Jesus is looking for disciples. He doesn't need more consultants. If you're in that position and you're saying, why am I here? Because God is saying, I want to open the door to the feast. I want to show you the abundance. But that abundance is both emotional and spiritual. Are you serving in a ministry? Are you getting involved? Are you exercising those muscles? Are you saying, I want more than just the spectacle. I want something with substance. I want something with meaning. So I believe Elijah learned a powerful lesson. And I think we can too. I don't want to just tell you what drew him to the cave. I want to tell you what God did to pull him out of the cave. Maybe you're there, or maybe you know somebody that is. The first thing that I think, if you're going to walk with Elijah, the first thing that you have to understand is you have to learn to make sense of the wilderness. You see, after the spectacle, after the amazing thing, there's a tendency for us to kind of pat ourselves on the back. And I can't help but wonder if Elijah did a little of that to say, hey, I'm kind of special. Look at what God did through me. I'm pretty awesome. And yet, through the wilderness, he had to temper that and recognize what God is really doing. If you find yourself in a time of wilderness, a time of questioning, usually it's because whatever you thought had value is changing. God is revealing something. Something in your life is changing. And you can't quite make sense of it yet. You're in a wilderness. You're trying to discern what is real value to you. In that moment in that cave, Elijah came to realize that it wasn't by his power, but by God, and God had never abandoned him. The second thing that we have to learn is you have to learn to listen for the whisper. We want God in the powerful, the music, the musicians, which open the door to us, but we want the spectacular. We want to see God in the clouds and in the heavens, and God is saying, I want you to hear me in the little voices that you hear during the day. I want you to see me in the smiles and in the twinkling of the eyes of the people that you encounter at work tomorrow. I want you to hear me when you're stopped at a traffic light or when you're passing another motorist. I want you to hear that still, small voice. It's not the spectacular, but it's the sensitivity of knowing where God is. And finally, I want you to know that there's more to church than what just happens on Sunday morning. See, sometimes we think our Christianity begins and ends right here. In my thoughts, Christianity, church is a comma in your Christianity. It leads somewhere. What happens today is intended to lead you into tomorrow. It's intended to lead you into a new life, a new possibility. And so what we recognize is that we have to recognize that wilderness is a part of our journey. We all go through that. We also have to recognize that still small voice of our prayers and God's presence. And then we have to recognize it because God is saying it's time for us to stand up, to make a difference, to be changed by all that God has in store for us. So let me ask you, do you need to be replenished? Are you tired? There's a reason that they call it the rat race. Are you tired of being that person? Are you tired of being surrounded by people that believe that more is better? Are you just tired? Then let me ask you the next question. Why are you here? What are you looking for? What is it that God wants for you? What are you closing off? This morning we have a wonderful opportunity. We're doing a baptism. I believe that God is still calling people like Cheryl, still calling people, and still saying, this can be your day. This can be your moment. This can be that new beginning you've always wanted. The altar is open. The opportunity is always available. But at some point, when God says, come out of the cave, you have to stand up and take that step. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we recognize that you use people like us, people that are still frightened and still feel lost. And we pray, Father, that you transform us by your grace, that you touch the lives of each person, draw them out of the darkness and into the light, and may they feel the joy and the wonder of what you have in store. We give you thanks, O God, for each person that continues to travel that journey, that may have found themselves in a cave, but now are proclaiming boldly who you are and the hope that they have. Help each of every one of us to renew our faith in Christ, for it's in his name we pray. Amen. Would you share that with me?
It displayed the glory of God in the dawn of time when the Spirit of